What kind of film were you keen to avoid making?
We were very keen not to make a biography that has been done before. So, for instance, a lot of the biography films you see, you usually have an English actor, speaking the words of Van Gogh, looking earnestly directly into the camera, going through periods of angst, cutting off the ear, eating yellow paint, things like that, looking like a crazy guy. We were very keen not to do a biography like that. We were very much looking at the biography through the art and also the people that surrounded him, the other artists like Paul Gauguin, like Bernard, Toulouse-Lautrec. We wanted to look at his life as it reflected on them, and also to introduce the letters in a way that was much more of a pared back sort of psychological examination of who this person was.
Because I was going to ask you, where's all the stuff about the ear?
Yes, well, that's a highly disputed sort of incident, of course. I mean, it did happen. He got into an argument with Paul Gauguin. They did have a dispute. Paul Gauguin was down in Arles at the Yellow House for only 2 months. They painted together. They went out and they drank together. Went to the brothels together. They got on as friends. But then Van Gogh's a very intense guy. He's the sort of guy, if you went to the pub, after a while you'd start to get a little bit annoyed about him because he's getting a bit intense about something. So he knew how to. He just couldn't help himself. He was so passionate about his own point of view and his own opinions. And he and Gauguin fell out. No one quite knows why he cut his ear, but he had a psychotic moment and cut off just a small part of the lobe of his left ear, not the whole ear. And the rest is sort of part of mythology, really.
I was going to ask you about why you think Van Gogh stands out so prominently in the public's imagination. Why is that?
Yes, well, it's because Van Gogh has become very much the artist. He's, in all intents and purposes, he's always sort of lived the life of the artist. He's always been the archetypal artist. And he painted some amazing pictures, which of course have become very prominent in recent history because they've been sold for millions and millions and millions of dollars, pounds, but when you sort of read his letters, which are incredible, you actually get a sense that this guy actually wasn't the greatest artist to begin with, but he actually learnt his craft and he worked within a network of other artists, and he actually had to sort of conquer art. He had this struggle inside him, which I think a lot of artists relate to. They relate to this struggle of how to deal with expression using paint and canvas.
What do you think your film says about the life of the artist that is still true today?
I think it's that struggle that artists go through to actually express what they're trying to say, to work within an art market, which can be quite cruel and somehow unjust. And Van Gogh certainly went through that. If you read his letters, he was always sending his paintings off, trying to get them sold, trying to get them in exhibitions, having rejection after rejection. And so that's something that contemporary artists have to deal with a lot. Also, he was very keen to be part of a network of artists. He loved it. A lot of people think that he just was some isolated genius person. He just was off to the side and didn't want to be part of the world, but that's absolutely not true. He craved having conversations with artists, being part of an artist community. He was very forthright and opinionated, and sometimes he would, create sort of tensions within these communities. But, I think that is true of a lot of artists who are very passionate about their work.
Now, the film was made with the imprimatur of the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. What special access did you get from the museum?
When we make these films, and we've made several these films with institutions, it's always important that we get the full backing of the institutes. No point trying to make the film without the type of film we're trying to make anyway, where we get very close and intimate with the works and have access to the works. And so we were offered access to his letters, for instance, to his early drawings, to things that actually other people haven't seen in the museum. We looked not in the museum, sorry, in public, and we were also given sort of several nights to take our cameras in and to get very close and personal with the paintings, which was a great privilege. But we couldn't have done it without the collaboration of the institution.
Did the museum impose any conditions?
Yes. Well, of course, there's always conditions with working with these institutions. There's a lot of security issues, and in fact, the people who have the most say in a lot of these situations are security people, and that's completely understandable. These are some of the most famous works of art in the world, and they're very precious. And but once you get an understanding and you have a procedure in place, they were very helpful. I mean, the hardest thing is getting the permissions and getting everyone to be on board with it. But once that happens, it's quite a smooth process we've found in the past. But it's completely understandable, and it happens in every single institution. It's not just the Van Gogh Museum. It happens in every institution that we've worked in. There's always been a procedure that we have to go through. But once you negotiate that, everything seems much more, is much easier.
Now, there are a couple of revelations in your film, and I think the main one is the whole idea of him being a genius. Being in the art world, you would know that genius is probably the most overused word in the whole language. And your film does show that, well, he actually wasn't really a genius. Van Gogh really had to work hard to develop his skill and his style. Yeah. I like the fact that your film really emphasised this part of his work.
Yeah, that's actually a bit of a revelation for me as well. I mean, I studied fine art. I studied painting in Melbourne, and I thought I knew a lot about Van Gogh until I actually worked on this film and read his letters. And there's a lot of things that I found very surprising. That he was extremely well read. He was an erudite sort of person. But I also thought that he was just, right from the off, a really amazing genius artist, but he wasn't. He was actually quite clumsy with his drawing and what have you. But he did realise that if you're going to conquer art, you actually have to conquer drawing, and that's why he spent years and years and years trying to draw and not actually making any paintings whatsoever. But I think that when you talk about his genius, he wasn't like born a genius, but he actually found a style, and he found himself, I think, from Paris onwards through Arles and some of those paintings when he was actually going through psychotic moments in Saint-Remy. He painted some of the most incredible paintings, and he found a style that was his genius. It wasn't a copycat style. He's been copied a lot, but he actually found a very unique way of making paintings that sort of took the genre on, painting on, and I think that's probably where his genius was. I don't think he was trying to be a genius or wasn't aware of being a genius. In fact, he didn't sell much when he was alive. But after he died, a lot of people, including people like Paul Gauguin and his contemporaries, all realized that he was the most avant-garde of them all.
What about that treasure trove of letters that he had? Did you know about them?
To tell you the truth, I knew that that a lot of his biography had been based on his letters, but what I hadn't realized was how extensive they were and how incredibly informative they are, and particularly about his early life. I mean, he wanted to be a preacher, and there's an amazing sort of long letters where he's quoting scripture and mixing it up with quotes from Shakespeare, and then talking about an image he'd seen in a museum. Just amazing. He was just a prolific letter writer, and it's very, very informative. And the Van Gogh Museum have done a great thing. They've interpreted all the letters, digitized them, they put them all online for free for people to look at, and they are incredibly interesting.
Now, I'm very keen to know what were some of the difficulties in shooting the paintings so that they didn't look like postcards. David, there must have been restrictions. I don't imagine that you would have been allowed to fire up a bank of Klieg lights over the starry night.
Yeah, well, actually, the Starry Night is not in the Van Gogh Museum, so we didn't have quite that problem. But actually, this is a technique we've developed over several of these films of how to actually capture the images. I mean, a lot of museums have fantastic digital stills, and when you look at the digital stills, there's something slightly dead about them. But there's something that cinema can bring, the way that you photograph using a cinema camera, that actually brings these to life. You see the 3D-ness of it. You see the textures. You see, you know, you can get up very close, so you see the artist's hand mark and everything like that. And this is what makes them very alluring. And in the films, we linger on these things. We give you time to actually look at them, which I think is very important, much so than you can look at just the digital reproduction in a book, for instance.
Well, you actually see the brush strokes on the works, on the canvas, and that's it's a very powerful image to see. You don't usually see it when you're looking at it at flat on.
No, absolutely, and it's all part of the artist's language as well, mark making. You know, the stroke that you make, you know, the way he makes it. And Van Gogh's a very interesting guy because he mixed his styles up. One minute he's painting very thickly, the next minute he's painting very thinly, like Toulouse-Lautrec did. So he was always being influenced by friends and people that he knew and that he was associating with. He was trying things, he was experimenting until he sort of started to strike on his quite iconic way of painting, which of course Starry Night, irises, blossoms, and all those other, the sunflowers, iconic paintings that he made have this particular style.
Now, mate, here's probably the most important question. How do you pronounce his name?
Do you know what? It's quite interesting. I asked the same question to the Dutch curators, and even when we were interviewing them, they had different ways of actually pronouncing. One would say Van Gogh, one would say Van Gogh with a sort of accent. The Americans say Van Gogh. It's interesting. Do you know what? One of the curators said, "Why do you think he just signed his name Vincent?" It's because even in his day, people always got his last name mispronounced or something, so he just called himself Vincent. Also because Rembrandt used to sign it just Rembrandt, which is also his first name, so he was following this tradition. But even when Van Gogh was alive, they kept getting his name mixed up or mispronounced, so I just think it's just something. The correct is Van Gogh.
You did The Girl with the Pearl Earring as well. You've also done some pretty topical films. You made Heavy Water, a film for Chernobyl, and in conjunction with that, you made a film called Pripyat about the ghost town that catastrophe created. Are you getting a taste to make longer form, more topical documentaries? Yeah,
I mean, Phil Grabsky, the producer of Sabotage Productions, he has a long history of documentary filmmaking. I come very much from the artist point of view. I make a lot of arts documentaries or artist films. I work a lot with artists, making films for them and with them. I'm very interested in the sort of the long-form narrative documentary, and I'm interested in trying to make it a different type of format. I mean, the event cinema has very much the interview and the sort of background, but I think I'm quite keen to look at new ways of telling narrative stories through the long form.
Can you tell me just a little bit very quickly about Atomic TV?
Well, Atomic TV was something that I set up. It's a website. It's basically when I left Melbourne, I came to London and I was a painter, and eventually I moved into it's a long story. But I moved into digital media, new media, working with sort of interactive art and things like that, and I saw Atomic TV as a way of having some sort of portal where I could collaborate with other people, and a lot of my work is about collaboration. And so not just collaborating with other filmmakers, but collaborating with poets, with writers, with musicians. And so if you look at my website, Atomic TV, you'll see that it's actually quite a diverse amount of work, working in sort of museum work through to artist gallery-based work through to event cinema.
Now, you're over there in London, living the high life in the art scene in London, but you're originally from Melbourne. Whereabouts from Melbourne are you from, and how'd you wind up over there, you traitor?
Well, I'm a suburban Melbourne boy, Glen Waverley, where I was born and brought up and went to school. And then I went to RMIT to study fine art. And when I left, I actually started, while I was painting in the studio during the day, I was also looking for work as an actor. So I did a few small little roles in things like Prisoner and, the Crawford productions and things like that. And I got myself a role in the film, and I thought, well, I made a bit of money here. I'll just do what a lot of Australians do and do the tour of Europe. And as soon as I went to Europe, I actually found a lot of my roots. My parents are British, and I actually found myself in Europe. So London's I don't really speak languages, so London being an English-speaking portal was fantastic, and I've been here ever since, really. I met my wife here, and so this is where my life is.